Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The ink was still wet on the paper, glistening like a fresh wound under the unforgiving glare of the chandelier, when Julian whispered the words that would shatter the empire. "I hope the silence is worth the price of your pride, Cashin." It was a sentence that would haunt Cashin Blackwood for 5 years, but in that moment, the Alpha CEO of Blackwood Industries merely swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, refusing to look at the trembling Omega standing before him. Outside, the Christmas Eve blizzard battered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, turning the world into a chaotic swirl of white and gray, a mirror of the storm raging inside Julian's chest. The prenup was ironclad. The divorce papers, drafted by Cashin's ruthlessly efficient legal team, lay on the mahogany desk between them. They were ending a 2-year marriage that had been nothing more than a merger between the Blackwood banking dynasty and the failing Vesper aristocratic line. Or so Cashin thought. "Take the settlement," Cashin said, his voice a low baritone that used to make Julian's knees weak, but now only sent a shiver of dread down his spine. He didn't turn around. He stared out at the city lights, cold and detached. "It's generous. More than enough to keep you in comfort while you figure out whatever it is you do." Julian's hand hovered over his stomach, a protective, instinctive gesture concealed beneath his oversized cashmere coat. He was 3 months along. The morning sickness had been brutal, dismissed by Cashin as nervousness or seeking attention. The scent of the Alpha, spiced tobacco and cold rain, saturated the room, usually a source of comfort, now a suffocating reminder of what he was losing. "I don't want your money, Cashin," Julian said softly. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out not a pen, but a small velvet pouch. He placed it on the desk next to the unsigned check. It contained the wedding band Cashin had slid onto his finger without a smile 2 years ago. Cashin finally turned, his steel-gray eyes narrowing. "Don't be dramatic, Julian. You have no assets. Your family disowned you when you failed to produce an heir within the first year. Without me, you are destitute. I would rather freeze in the snow than spend another night in a bed where I am tolerated, not wanted," Julian replied, his voice gaining a sudden, terrifying steadiness. He picked up the pen. With a swift, elegant hand, he signed the divorce decree. Julian Vesper, he didn't take the check. He turned on his heel, the heavy thud of the door closing signaling the end of an era. Cashin scoffed, taking a sip of his whiskey. "He'll be back," he muttered to the empty room. "He won't make it past the lobby." But as the silence settled, heavy and oppressive, Cashin's eyes drifted to the desk. Not to the signed papers, but to the small waste bin beside the desk that Julian had bumped into on his way out, knocking it slightly askew. Lying on top of the crumpled drafts of business memos was a crumpled medical receipt. Frowning, Cashin set his glass down. He walked over, retrieving the paper. It was from a clinic in the lower district, a place Julian shouldn't have known existed. Cashin smoothed the wrinkles. Patient: Julian Vesper Blackwood. Status: gestational week 12. Asterisk health notes: high risk. Stress levels critical. Advise immediate bed rest. Asterisk the world tilted. The whiskey glass shattered on the floor, unnoticed. "Julian?" Cashin breathed, the scent of distress suddenly hitting him. A phantom smell he had ignored for weeks. He sprinted for the door, tearing it open, sprinting past his startled security detail. "Get the car. Now!" But when he reached the street, the blizzard had erased everything. The tracks in the snow were already filled. The streets were empty. Julian Vesper had vanished into the white abyss, taking the heir to the Blackwood Empire, and the only heart Cashin hadn't realized he possessed with him. 4 years later, the city of Oakhaven was a world away from the steel and glass metropolis of Cashin's domain. It was a coastal sanctuary for artists, old money, and those who wished to remain forgotten. Cashin adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke suit, his face leaner, harder than it had been 4 years ago. The gray in his eyes had turned to ice. He was here for a merger, a hostile takeover of a shipping line that would solidify his control over the eastern seaboard. He wasn't here for pleasure. He certainly wasn't here for the charity gala being held at the Oakhaven Opera House. But his business partner, a man named Sterling, had insisted. "You need to be seen, Blackwood. The rumors that you're a recluse are hurting stock prices." Besides, Sterling grinned. "The rumor is the mysterious patron of this gala is revealing a masterpiece tonight." Cashin stood on the balcony of the Opera House, swirling a glass of sparkling water. He hadn't touched alcohol since that Christmas Eve. He watched the crowd below, a sea of masks and jewels. He felt nothing. He was a machine now, functioning on caffeine and the cold fury of a man who had searched the globe for a ghost and found nothing. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "please welcome the visionary behind tonight's exhibition, the recluse artist known only as V." The curtains on the main stage parted. Cashin boredly glanced over. Then he froze. Standing in the spotlight, dressed in a suit of crushed white velvet that hugged a lithe, graceful frame, was a man with hair the color of spun gold. He was older, his jawline sharper, his stance radiating a quiet, undeniable power that the trembling boy from 4 years ago had never possessed. It was Julian. But this wasn't the submissive Omega who flinched at loud noises. This man held a microphone with confidence, his blue eyes scanning the crowd with a predator's assessment. "Thank you," Julian's voice rang out, deeper, richer. "Art is born from suffering. And tonight, I sell my suffering to the highest bidder." Cashin's glass snapped in his hand. Blood mixed with the water, dripping onto the marble railing. "Find him," Cashin growled into his earpiece, startling his head of security. "Secure all exits. Nobody leaves." Julian walked backstage, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had felt it, the weight of that gaze. It felt like a physical touch, a phantom hand around his throat. He was here. "Papa!" The small voice broke through his panic. Julian dropped to his knees, opening his arms just in time for a small whirlwind to crash into him. Elian was 3.5 years old, with messy black hair and eyes of piercing steel gray. He was the spitting image of a man Julian had tried to scrub from his soul. "Did you see me, Papa?" Elian chirped, holding up a drawing. "I stayed quiet with Nanny. You were perfect, my little wolf," Julian whispered, burying his face in the boy's neck, inhaling the scent of milk and baby powder. It grounded him. "But we have to go. Now." "Why?" "Because the monster from the stories is here," Julian murmured, standing up and grabbing his coat. He signaled to the nanny, an older beta woman named Martha. "Take him to the car. The back exit. Go straight to the safe house. Do not stop." "Julian, what is—" "Go!" Julian snapped, his eyes flashing with a ferocity that silenced her. As they hurried away, Julian turned to the mirror in his dressing room. He fixed his hair. He needed to buy them time. He needed to be the distraction. The door handle turned. Locked. Then, a heavy thud. The wood splintered. The door flew open. Cashin Blackwood stood in the frame, his chest heaving, his hand bleeding, his pheromones flooding the small room. Burnt cedar and ozone, heavy with aggression and a terrifying desperation. "You look good in white," Cashin said, stepping into the room and kicking the door shut behind him. "It suits the ghost you became." Julian didn't back down. He leaned against his vanity, crossing his arms. "You're trespassing, Mr. Blackwood. My security will be here in seconds." "I bought the security company 10 minutes ago," Cashin replied, taking a step closer. "I bought the building 5 minutes ago. And I'm currently debating buying this entire city just to keep you from running again." "Why are you here, Cashin?" Julian asked, coldness seeping into his tone. "Did you run out of divorce papers to ignore?" "I signed them. We are done." "You signed them," Cashin acknowledged, stopping inches from Julian. The height difference was still there, but Julian didn't crane his neck. He stared straight ahead at Cashin's tie. "But I never filed them." Julian's breath hitched. That's illegal." That's manipulation. It's marriage, Cashin hissed. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he grazed Julian's cheek. Julian flinched but didn't pull away. You left. You were pregnant. Where is it? Where is who? Don't play games with me. Cashin slammed his hand against the mirror next to Julian's head, shattering the glass. The child. The receipt, Julian. I found it. Did you get rid of it? To spite me? The agony in Cashin's voice was raw, a gaping wound. It surprised Julian. He had expected anger, possessiveness. He hadn't expected grief. Julian corrected softly. Cashin froze. He has a name, and he is far away from you. Cashin let out a shuddering breath, his forehead dropping to rest against Julian's shoulder. The mighty Alpha, the king of Wall Street, slumped as if his strings had been cut. He's alive. Thank God. You don't get to care, Julian said, pushing him away. You wanted an heir, not a son. You wanted a broodmare, not a husband. I saved him from becoming just another asset in your portfolio. I wanted you, Cashin roared, grabbing Julian's shoulders. I was a fool. I was blind and arrogant, and I thought I had time. When you left. The silence, Julian. It was deafening. I didn't care about the heir. I cared that the only thing in my life that felt warm was gone. You accused me of leaking secrets. I know, Cashin pleaded. It was my uncle. I found out a week later. I destroyed him. I stripped him of everything. I tore the world apart looking for you. Julian looked at the man he had once loved, perhaps still loved, in the dark, treacherous corners of his heart. But he remembered the coldness of that Christmas Eve. It's too late, Cashin. We have a life. I am not your Omega anymore. You are, Cashin growled, his eyes flashing red, the biological instinct rising. You are my mate. That hasn't changed. And that boy is my son. I will not let you keep him from me. Then you will have to drag us back in chains, Julian spat. Because I will never go willingly. Cashin stared at him, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then he straightened his suit. The mask of the CEO slid back into place, but the eyes remained haunted. I don't use chains anymore, Julian, Cashin said quietly. I'll use patience. I will court you. I will grovel. I will burn down the world to warm you if you are cold. But I am not leaving Oakhaven without my family. Before Julian could respond, the dressing room window exploded inward. Black-clad figures swung in on ropes, shattering the moment. Mercenaries. Julian reacted instantly, grabbing a pair of scissors from the vanity, but a heavy boot kicked them from his hand. An arm wrapped around his neck, choking him. Cashin Blackwood. A muffled voice laughed from behind a tactical mask. We knew you'd lead us to the weak spot eventually. It was the remnants of the rival cartel Cashin had decimated years ago. They hadn't been looking for Julian. They had been tracking Cashin, waiting for him to be distracted. Let him go, Cashin said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. He held his hands up, but his muscles were coiled like steel springs. We want the Blackwood clearance codes. And we want to transport out of the country, the leader said, pressing a gun to Julian's temple. Or the pretty painter paints the wall with his brains. Julian struggled, gasping for air. Cashin. Elian. Don't let them find. The mention of the name, the confirmation of the son, snapped something in Cashin. He didn't negotiate. He didn't hesitate. Cashin moved with a speed that defied logic. He lunged not at the gunman, but at the light switch, plunging the room into darkness. 2 shots rang out. A scream. The sound of breaking bone. When the emergency lights flickered on seconds later, the 3 mercenaries were on the floor, unconscious or groaning with broken limbs. Cashin stood over them, his suit torn, blood dripping from a graze on his temple and a deeper wound in his shoulder. He swayed, turning to Julian. Are you hurt? Cashin rasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Julian stared, wide-eyed. You got shot. Flesh wound. Cashin grunted, kicking the gun away from the leader's hand. Are you hurt? No. Good. Cashin fell to his knees, his adrenaline crashing. Julian rushed forward, catching him. He pressed his hands against Cashin's wound, the hot blood staining his white velvet suit crimson. Why did you do that? Julian cried, tears finally spilling over. You could have died. You said. Cashin coughed, a pained smile touching his lips. You said you saved him from a monster. I had to prove. I could be the shield instead. You idiot! Julian sobbed, ripping his sleeve to make a tourniquet. Let me see him, Julian, Cashin whispered, his vision blurring. Just once. Before I bleed out on this ugly carpet. You aren't dying, you dramatic alpha, Julian said, tightening the fabric. And yes, you can see him, but you have to earn it. You have to live to earn it. Cashin's hand covered Julian's blood-stained one. Challenge accepted. Epilogue: the hospital room was filled with flowers, most of which Julian had promptly thrown in the trash because the scent was overwhelming. Cashin sat up in bed, his shoulder bandaged, a laptop open on his lap. He was working naturally. Put it away, Julian ordered, walking in with 2 cups of coffee. Cashin obeyed instantly, closing the lid. Habit. Break it. Julian sat on the edge of the bed. The dynamic had shifted. The fear was gone. In its place was a tentative, fragile bridge. Martha brought him, Julian said quietly. Cashin's breath hitched. Is he outside? Julian nodded. He stood up and opened the door. A small boy peeked in, clutching a stuffed wolf. He looked at the man in the bed with big, curious gray eyes that mirrored Cashin's own. Elian, Julian said gently. Come here. The boy shuffled forward. Cashin held his breath, terrified that the boy would smell the violence on him, the past, the sins. But Elian just sniffed the air, smelling the underlying scent of father that biology dictated he recognize. He walked up to the bed and poked Cashin's uninjured arm. Papa says you fought the bad guys, Elian said. Cashin swallowed the lump in his throat. He looked at Julian, who was watching with a guarded, yet soft expression. I did, Cashin rasped. Did you win? Cashin looked at the boy, then at Julian, the 2 halves of his soul that he had almost destroyed. I think, Cashin smiled, tears pricking his eyes. I'm just starting to. Julian moved closer, resting his hand on Elian's head, but allowing his fingers to brush against Cashin's arm. A spark. Promise. One day at a time, Cashin, Julian whispered. One day at a time. One day at a time, Cashin agreed. And for the first time in his life, the alpha didn't check the time. He had all he needed right here. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. Not with chains, but with the courage to walk away, and the grace to forgive. If you enjoyed seeing Elian take control of his father's heart, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who drove you away to protect his empire, only to nearly die saving you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,